Good afternoon. Once again, my students, we are going to be reading Night, Chapter 8. So here we go. Let's continue. At the entrance to the camp, SS officers were waiting for us. We were counted. Then we were directed to the Appelplatz. The orders were given over the loudspeakers. Form ranks of 5, groups of 100, 5 steps forward. I tightened my grip on my father's hand. The old familiar fear, not to lose him. Very close to us stood the tall chimney of the crematorium's furnace. It no longer impressed us. It barely drew our attention. A veteran of Buchenwald told us that we would be taking a shower and afterward be sent to different blocks. The idea of a hot shower fascinated me. My father didn't say a word. He was breathing heavily beside me. "Father," I said, "just another moment. Soon we'll be able to lie down. You'll be able to rest." He didn't answer. I myself was so weary that his silence left me indifferent. My only wish was to take the shower as soon as possible and lie down on a cot. Only it wasn't easy to reach the showers. Hundreds of prisoners crowded the area. The guards seemed unable to restore order. They were lashing out left and right to no avail. Some prisoners who didn't have the strength to jostle or even to stand sat down in the snow. My father wanted to do the same. He was moaning, "I can't anymore. It's over. I shall die right here." He dragged me toward a pile of snow from which protruded human shapes, torn blankets. "Leave me," he said. "I can't go on anymore. Have pity on me. I'll wait here until we can go into the showers. You'll come and get me." I could have screamed in anger. To have lived and endured so much? Was I going to let my father die now? Now that we would be able to take a good hot shower and lie down? "Father!" I howled. "Father, get up! Right now, you'll kill yourself!" And I grabbed his arm. He continued to moan. "Don't yell, my son. Have pity on your old father. Let me rest here, a little. I beg of you, I'm so tired. No more strength." He had become childlike, weak, frightened, vulnerable. "Father," I said, "you cannot stay here." I pointed to the corpses around him. They too had wanted to rest here. "I see, my son. I do see them. Let them sleep. They haven't closed an eye for so long. They're exhausted. Exhausted." His voice was tender. I howled into the wind, "They're dead! They will never wake up, never! Do you understand?" This discussion continued for some time. I knew that I was no longer arguing with him, but with death itself, with death that he had already chosen. The sirens began to wail. Alert. The lights went out in the entire camp. The guards chased us toward the blocks. In a flash, there was no one left outside. We were only too glad not to have to stay outside any longer in the freezing wind. We let ourselves sink into the floor. The cauldrons at the entrance found no takers. There were several tiers of bunks. To sleep was all that mattered. When I woke up, it was daylight. That is when I remembered that I had a father. During the alert, I had followed the mob, not taking care of him. I knew he was running out of strength, so close to death, and yet I had abandoned him. I went to look for him, yet at the same time, a thought crept into my mind. If only I didn't find him. If only I were relieved of this responsibility, I could use all my strength to fight for my own survival, to care for only myself. Instantly, I felt ashamed of myself forever. I walked for hours without finding him. Then I came to a block where they were distributing black coffee. People stood in line, quarreled. A plaintive voice came from behind me. "Eliezer, my son, bring me a little coffee." I ran toward him. "Father, I've been looking for you for so long. Where did you go? Did you sleep? How are you feeling?" He seemed to be burning with fever. I fought my way to the coffee cauldron like a wild beast. and I succeeded in bringing back a cup. I took one gulp. The rest was for him. I shall never forget the gratitude that shone in his eyes when he swallowed this beverage. The gratitude of a wounded animal. With these few mouthfuls of hot water, I had probably given him more satisfaction than during my entire childhood. He was lying on the boards, ashen, his lips pale and dry, shivering. I could stay with him. I couldn't stay with him any longer. We had been ordered to go outside to allow for cleaning of the blocks. Only the sick could remain inside. We stayed outside for 5 hours. We were given soup. When they allowed us to return to the blocks, I rushed toward my father. "Did you eat?" "No." "Why?" "They didn't give us anything. They said that we were sick, that we would die soon, that it would be a waste of food. I can't go on." I gave him what was left of my soup, but my heart was heavy. I was aware that I was doing it grudgingly. Just like Rabbi Elihu's son, I had not passed the test. Every day my father was getting weaker. His eyes were watery, his face the color of dead leaves. On the third day after we arrived in Buchenwald, everybody had to go to the showers, even the sick, who were instructed to go last. When we returned from the showers, we had to wait outside a long time. The cleaning of the blocks had not been completed. From afar, I saw my father and ran to meet him. He went by me like a shadow, passing me without stopping, without a glance. I called to him. He did not turn around. I ran after him. "Father, where are you running?" He looked at me for a moment, and his gaze was distant, otherworldly, the face of a stranger. It lasted only a moment, and then he ran away. Suffering from dysentery, my father was prostrate on his cot, with another 5 sick inmates nearby. I sat next to him, watching him. I no longer dared to believe that he could still elude death. I did all I could to give him hope. All of a sudden, he sat up and placed his feverish lips against my ear. "Eliezer, I must tell you where I buried the gold and silver in the cellar, you know." And I began talking faster and faster, afraid of running out of time before he could tell me everything. I tried to tell him that it was not yet over, that we would be going home together. But he no longer wanted to listen to me. He could no longer listen to me. He was worn out. Saliva mixed with blood was trickling from his lips. He had closed his eyes. He was gasping more than breathing. For a ration of bread, I was able to exchange cots to be next to my father. When the doctor arrived in the afternoon, I went to tell him that my father was very ill. "Bring him here." I explained that he could not stand up, but the doctor would not listen, and so, with great difficulty, I brought my father to him. He stared at him, then asked curtly, "What do you want?" "My father's sick," I answered in his place. "Dysentery." "That's not my business. I'm a surgeon. Go on. Make room for the others." My protests were in vain. "I can't go on, my son. Take me back to my bunk." I took him back and helped him lie down. He was shivering. "Try to get some sleep, Father. Try to fall asleep." His breathing was labored, his eyes were closed, but I was convinced that he was seeing everything, that he was seeing the truth in all things. Another doctor came to the block. My father refused to get up. He knew that it would be of no use. In fact, that doctor had come only to finish off the patients. I listened to him shouting at them that they were lazy good-for-nothings who only wanted to stay in bed. I considered jumping him, strangling him, but I had neither the courage nor the strength. I was riveted to my father's agony. My hands were aching. I was clenching them so hard. To strangle the doctor and the others, to set the whole world on fire, my father's murderers. But even the cry stuck in my throat. On my return from the bread distribution, I found my father crying like a child. "My God, they're beating me." "Who?" I thought he was delirious. "Him, the Frenchman in the pulp. They beat me." One more stab to the heart, one more reason to hate, one less reason to live. Eliezer, tell them not to beat me. I'm dying. Why are they beating me? I began to insult his neighbors. They mocked me. I promised them bread, soup. They laughed. Then they got angry. They could not stand my father any longer. They said, because he no longer was able to drag himself outside to relieve himself. The following day, he complained that they had taken his ration of bread. While you were asleep? No, I wasn't asleep. They threw themselves on me. They snatched it from me, my bread. They maimed me. Again. I can't go on. Give me some water. I knew that he must not drink, but he pleaded with me so long that I gave in. Water was the worst poison for him. What else could I do for him? With or without water, it would be over soon. You at least have pity on him. Have pity on him. I, his only son. A week went by like that. Is this your father? Asked the Blockleteste. Yes. He is very sick. The doctor won't do anything for him. He looked me straight in the eye. The doctor cannot do anything more for him, and neither can you. He placed his big, hairy hand on my shoulder and added, listen to me, kid. Don't forget that you are in a concentration camp. In this place, it is every man for himself, and you cannot think of others, not even your father. In this place, there is no such thing as father, brother, friend. Each of us lives and dies alone. Let me give you good advice. Stop giving your ration of bread and soup to your old father. You cannot help him anymore, and you are hurting yourself. In fact, you should be getting his rations. I listened to him without interrupting. He was right, I thought deep down, not daring to admit it to myself. Too late to save your old father. You could have 2 rations of bread, 2 rations of soup. It was only a fraction of a second, but it left me feeling guilty. I ran to get some soup and brought it to my father, but he did not want it. All he wanted was water. Don't drink water. Eat the soup. I'm burning up. Why are you so mean to me, my son? Water. I brought him water. Then I left the block for roll call, but I quickly returned back. I lay down on the upper bunk. The sick were allowed to stay in the block, so I would be sick. I didn't want to leave my father. All around me there was silence now, broken only by moaning. In front of the block, the SS were giving orders. An officer passed between the bunks. My father was pleading. My son, water, I'm burning up. My insides. Silence over there! Barked the officer. Eliezer, continued my father. Water. The officer came closer and shouted to him to be silent. But my father did not hear. He continued to call me. The officer wielded his club and dealt him a violent blow to the head. I didn't move. I was afraid. My body was afraid of another blow, this time to my head. My father groaned once more. I heard, Eliezer. I could see that he was still breathing in gasps. He didn't move. When I came down from my bunk after roll call, I could see his lips trembling. He was murmuring something. I remained more than an hour leaning over him, looking at him, etching his body, broken face into my mind. Then I had to go to sleep. I climbed into my bunk above my father, who was still alive. The date was January 28th, 1945. I woke up at dawn on January 29th. On my father's cot there lay another sick person. They must have taken him away before daybreak and taken him to the crematorium. Perhaps he was still breathing. No prayers were said over his tomb, no candle lit in his memory. His last word had been my name. It called out to me, and I had not answered. I did not weep, and it pained me that I could not weep, but I was out of tears. Deep inside of me, And deep inside of me, if I could have searched the recesses of my feeble conscience, I might have found something like, these chapters do not get any easier, do they? Let's talk about some other passages that I find to be of particular interest. I believe that our humanity is designed to long for life. Even when we're surrounded by death, we cling to it. And we see this conflict of life and death in this chapter. Because frankly, Eliezer's father, he kind of makes sense. He's like, look, I can't go on any longer. Let me just lay down and fall asleep and die and just let me be. But Eliezer, he says, I yelled against the wind. They'll never wake, never. Don't you understand? This would be your final thing. Don't die. Fight. Fight. Eliezer knows that something inside him that he cannot explain is worth living, even in this hell that they are enduring. This terrible, horrible torment he knows is, let's live because we might get through it. Life is worth having. I don't know. It's a complicated, that's our humanity, and it's just complicated, right? I don't have a great explanation for it except to say that I noticed the words, and I noticed that Eli is pleading for his father to continue to live, even though his father can barely handle it anymore. All right, father-son relationship. Eli, he has this moment where he's thinking, if I don't find my father, I don't have to take care of my father. And if I don't have to take care of my father, I can focus on myself. And if I focus on myself, maybe I can survive. And we've seen this throughout the book. Of course, we know that Eli loves his father. But he has this thought, and he feels ashamed. And I don't blame him for having that thought. Again, our humanity is complicated. We want to survive and have our own life, and take care of ourselves and be selfish, but at the same time, we selflessly want to give to those we love, and we want to protect those we love. And when we do things that are not for the people we love, we feel that shame. All right, another example of the inhumanity. They said that if we were ill, we should die soon anyway, and it would be a pity to waste the food. That's horrible. That just because a person's sick, you're going to withhold their rations from them. They can only get better once they, get fed and get taken care of. So, if you guys know, at this point in the book, it's just horror after horror after horror. That they would take away the food from the sick and the dying simply because they're sick and dying and they're not going to need it much longer anyway, and I need it right now. I found this kind of funny. The doctor had only come to finish off the sick. Of course, we think of doctors as those who bring healing and bring life, but this doctor brings only death, so it's not very much of a doctor. And we all know that there's something radically, darkly ironic wrong about a doctor coming to finish off the sick. Anybody can finish off the sick. Only a true healing, helping doctor can bring peace and comfort to people. So this guy's a fraud. He's a fake. All right. Here, every man has to fight for himself. This is the advice that the leader was giving to Eli. He was looking at his sick father saying, dude, your dad's not going to make it. So fight for yourself. And in fact, you should be taking his food. If humanity is the consideration that every person has value and dignity, then this sentence is the opposite of that. It is the pure definition of inhumanity, of pure selfishness. Now, in circumstances, logically, it actually makes sense. Why would somebody who's clearly not going to survive get supplies? Especially my supplies, when I could eat it. I could eat double. The Nazis were evil, horrible people who set up an evil, horrible situation and a system that perpetuated death and selfishness and dying and cruelty. Every man has to fight for himself and not think of anyone else. Yeah. So we see this contradiction throughout this chapter quite a bit. All right. Pay attention to the dates. It was January 28th, 1945. Of course, heartbreaking. He goes to sleep, and when he wakes up, his father is gone. And that's it. I mean, we assume that his father is dead. He assumes his father's dead and been burned in the crematorium, but he doesn't really know. He doesn't know where his father's body is. One of the reasons why we have tombstones, why we mark the graves of those we love, so that we can remember them. And here he has no way to mark his father's grave, his father's body. The book began in 1942. Here it is, the end of chapter 8, almost the end of the book, 1945. So it's covered 3 years. And yeah, so anyway. All right, that's all for now. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.